For such a simple technique and execution, this thing is pretty complicated. Before we hop into this explanation of full counter, please tell me what other concepts you'd want me to explain in the comment section down below. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, please hit the notification bell in order to make sure you don't miss any of the videos that go up on the channel. Now, let's get into it. What's up guys, I got the pencil here, and it's time we finally do something a little bit different. We're going to explain. Specifically, we're going to explain the technique of Meliodas, the dragon sin of wrath from Seven Deadly Sins, and that technique's name is full counter. Now, full counter is initially very simple, or at least that's what it seems like. In explanation alone, it simply allows its user to reflect an attack back with over twice the power in the initial attack. It sounds relatively simple, until you get into all the subvariants, the meanings behind the word attack, and its users and how they use it. Now let's actually start off with the users of full counter, because we have to further divide it from there. There are 3 known users of full counter and its variations, with a hypothetical 3 other users, or at least people who likely understand how the technique works to possibly implant it in someone else or use it themselves. The first user we see on screen is Meliodas, who debuted the technique in chapter 1 in the fight against Twigo. Meliodas is the primary user of the technique who uses it as a substitute for his main magic. Estarossa is the second user of the technique that we see on screen, debuting his usage of the technique in chapter 184 in the battle with Escanor. Estarossa uses the technique as a supplement to his other magical abilities. The final user of full counter is Chandler, the creator of the technique, who debuted his usage of it in chapter 237 in the fight against Merlin. Chandler uses the technique as a simple part of his complex magical moveset. 2 hypothetical users of the technique are both Original Gother and Mael. The reason Original Gother may count as a user, or at least someone who understands the technique, is because he is the one who seemed to act as the trigger for Estarossa to learn the technique, and Estarossa is originally Mael, who never actually seemed to interact with Chandler nor have him as a teacher, so it's very unlikely that Chandler actually taught Estarossa full counter, especially the physical variation, which we never see Chandler use, despite how useful it would hypothetically be. However, it could be possible that Chandler taught Estarossa at some point and we just never saw it because it was off screen. The other hypothetical user would be Mael himself. He has full knowledge of his life as Estarossa, and nothing implies that full counter is a demon-only technique, meaning that it's likely that he still has access to his variation of the technique. The final possible user is the original demon, who, while never displaying the technique himself on screen, should be capable of wielding it since the creator of the technique is half of the original demon's makeup. However, enough of the users, let's get into actually explaining the main variants of full counter and their respective subvariants. First and foremost, we have the quote-unquote magical variation of full counter. Or is it really magical? Well, yes and no. The 2 main users of the magical variant of full counter are both Meliodas and Chandler. This variant of full counter allows the user to reflect a magical attack back at their opponent with over twice the power. This technique has 3 specific requirements that must be met before activation. 1. The user must have a weapon in hand, a conduit of sorts. Secondly, a user must be able to react to and swing their respective weapon with the proper timing in order to reflect the attack. Finally, there must be an attack to reflect. However, almost all 3 of these requirements are flexible. This weapon can vary from a regular sword to a broken blade to even a staff. However, magical attack, quote unquote, is basically a term that means the attack contains some manner of non-physical energy. It does not mean that Meliodas and Chandler are limited to single projectile based attacks composed of magic. While full counter is rather effective against those, full counter can reflect a variety of things. First things first, there are the simple magic projectiles that full counter can reflect. Examples are the 7 Deadly Sins combo move Nemesis, or summon lightning bolts such as the Pursuit of the Lightning Beast from Gale Thunder. Then full counter can also reflect magic infused weapons such as Twigo's sword and Chasiful's increased daggers. Then, full counter can counter invisible magic such as King's Staff's promotion or Merlin's magic seals. Then, it can also counter magic that hasn't been launched yet, such as Gale's explosions before launch. On top of all that, full counter is not limited to just magic. It can also reflect natural elements of the environment that are non-physical, such as natural lightning. Another interesting aspect of the power is that it is capable of reflecting multiple things at once, almost collecting them all in a sort of area that is much larger than the surface area of the weapon itself that is doing the reflecting, forming almost a reflective partial spear that captures everything and then throws it back. This essentially means that any attack infused with magic, whether it be a projectile, weapon, or fist, could be reflected back at their user with over twice the force. However, attacks that have no magic basis behind them are hard counters to the non-physical variation of full counter. So basically a regular punch from somebody that has no enhancements at all based around non-physical energy. Now, does this mean full counter can reflect anything non-physical, such as key attacks like the Kamehameha, chakra attacks like the Rasengan, or possibly cursed energy-based techniques such as Hollow Purple? It's shaky. We know magic, quote unquote, isn't exactly a set standard, as all magic within the 7 Deadly Sins world is fundamentally different, from lightning magic to explosive magic to nature-based magic to demonic magic and light magic, yet full counter seems to work on them all with no bias towards any single one. So it is possible that it could stretch beyond the assumed limitations of magic, since we know it does not actually mean magic, rather non-physical elements or physical elements infused with non-physical energy. It honestly would not be surprising if it could work cross-verse, considering full counter itself does not seem really bound to the magic system in either of its main variants, since the magical one works on non-magical elements such as natural lightning, and the physical one should honestly have no restriction cross-verse, considering it's reflecting a physical attack. Unlike regular genjutsu from Naruto, which requires a chakra network to function, full counter simply relies on your opponent having physical or non-physical attacks based on the fact that it has no stated or shown restrictions in terms of the type of physical and non-physical energy type attacks can be reflected. However, once again, that cannot be proven. We don't know for a fact it may work on the Kamehameha or Rasengan, simply for the fact that we have not seen it. We have been operating in a world of 7 Deadly Sins, and while we know full counter is not limited to just magical attacks due to how it interacts with natural elements of the environment, we don't know how it interacts with unnatural elements of the environment, such as cursed energy techniques and or chakra techniques and or key techniques. Anything could happen with any of those. So just for safety, if you're ever doing a cross-verse battle with Meliodas, just equalize the energies. It'll allow for a much more interesting battle, since both sides will be allowed their full toolkit rather than one side being arbitrarily restricted because of a certain system. On top of that, physical full counter shouldn't have any issues running into other verses because it's physical. There's no magical system there. The only thing that's magical is the nature of full counter itself, reflecting the physical force back at you, rather than using your own physical force as like a specific magic system tied into your physical force. Is basically a whole lot simpler. You can reflect a punch, because a punch is going to be a punch no matter where you go punch. So that is that. Now let's address the subvariants of the non-physical full counter. There's Counter Vanish, and the only shown user of this subvariant is Meliodas. This technique has different requirements compared to the true full counter. This variation of the technique does not require a weapon, actually the opposite, where the user needs to have at least one free hand. The user must raise their palm towards the attacks with fingers extended and their thumb tucked into their palm. The user must still be able to read the timing of the attack and where it's going, and there still must be an attack to vanish. Interestingly enough, there seems to be no upper limit to this technique, just like with the original full counter, which operates on the function the stronger you are, the stronger I become. Mon Speed was about to destroy all the 7 Deadly Sins on top of Hawkmama, but Meliodas was confident in his abilities to counter vanish the attack that was going to be used against him, even though Mon Speed was way out of his league at the point of the Meliodas we're discussing in that fight. So I'm not exactly sure if counter vanish works to the utmost degree, that as long as Meliodas can read the timing and nature of the attack and react to it, that he can just disappear regardless of how strong it is. But that is a possibility, but it was never shown on screen, so I'm not exactly sure about that. Meliodas has only really been shown to counter vanish techniques of those who are either his inferior or his superior. The two cases where he uses counter vanish are the battle against Cain in the Vizal fighting arc, and also his final fight against the Demon King in the final fight with the Demon King. As such, this subvariant is much more rare than the original, never popping up in the series that often, especially compared to its main counterpart. So honestly, it is still a very powerful ability, but it seems to be the lesser of the two, considering this is purely defensive, as it goes for an erase tactic rather than reflecting tactic. The other main subvariant of the non-physical full counter is Revenge Counter. This subvariant is arguably the most dangerous for both parties. The variant does require a weapon, but does not require the reading of attacks directed at the user. The attacks simply need to land. The main requirements for this technique is that Meliodas takes the damage, whether it be while powered up or preferably in base to take even more damage. A secondary requirement is that Meliodas must have a weapon on hand. Then he activates the technique by soaking up and stockpiling all the damage that he takes from the multiple attacks launched at him, and then returning all the damage he takes to his opponent in one attack, which he infuses into the weapon he is wielding. This attack is extremely powerful, but of course, if not used fast enough, Meliodas may end up dead before being able to use it. Those are the main sub-variants, so let's go to the other main variant, physical full counter. The only user of this variant of the technique is Estarossa, and it's honestly just as rare as the sub-variants of the non-physical full counter. Similar to its non-physical counterparts, there are specific requirements for the technique that must be met in order to be activated. 1. The user must have a weapon on hand. 2. The user must be capable of reading and reacting to the attack that is launched. And 3. The attack must have physical properties to it. When the counterable attack is launched at the user, they will then swing back at the attack and manage to reflect the attack back at their opponent with the force multiplied many times over, according to Estarossa himself. This varies from the non-physical version of full counter because while the non-physical version seems to only amplify the power by a little bit over twice the force, this variation of the technique actually multiplies the power of the initial hit many times over, according to Estarossa, rather than just a little over twice the power. Unlike the non-physical full counter, we have not seen many examples of this variant reflecting magic-fueled, physically based attacks. What I mean is we haven't seen this thing really reflect a punch that happens to have magic behind it. Even though the attack has magic behind it, it's still a physically based hit. We haven't actually seen it used like that. However, it stands to reason that considering Rita has Sunshine's magic infused in it, and Derriere is a naturally magic-based being, that an attack does not have to be purely physical to be reflected. It's just that it happens to be purely physical sometimes. All the attack really needs to have is a physical basis and not worry so much about the magical part after the fact, as long as there is that physical basis. This variant of full counter, due to its rarity, has never displayed any of the sub-variants that the non-physical full counter has had. Revenge counter may be accessible considering it's just being a physical damage tank until you need to swing back and then you take care of all your enemies, but I'm not sure how a physical counter vanish would work. Would the person's weapon or fist disappear, or would it just lose all of its force? Honestly, haven't a clue. Tell me what you think about that in the comment section down below. Like, do y'all think it would, just give me your hypothetical thoughts on that. What would a physical counter vanish look like? However, we don't get to see it in the manga, and due to the fact that Estarossa is now dead and gone, in the sense of his personality is dead and gone, I doubt we're ever going to see it again, or ever know the answer to what that could possibly look like. Then there are the combined techniques that are based around full counter, and those two are 7 Deadly Sins, an attack used in the Prisoners of the Sky movie, and 7 Deadly Sins combined technique, Nemesis, which they use to slay the Demon King. Those two are entirely based on full counter, as it requires Meliodas reflecting all their attacks combined. And with that, that's it. All of full counter explained. Its main form, sub-variants, special attacks, hypothetical users, all of it. However, to spice up the explained format a bit, I'm going to be introducing a little rating system for each concept I explain. The rating system will be out of 25 points split into 5 categories. These categories are the explained concepts or relevant usage within the narrative itself, how often the concept is used, how well the concept is used, how viable the concept is, and how cool it is. In category 1, relevant usage, full counter scores a 5 out of 5. Without full counter, Meliodas will be down his main magical technique, and the narrative could not function without it. It's like we wouldn't even get to the starting point of 7 Deadly Sins without full counter. It has to get a 5. In the second category, frequency, full counter gets another 5 out of 5 here, and almost every fight Meliodas stars in, or even is a part of, full counter makes a relevant appearance. It's due to its existence on other characters, not just Meliodas, that actually bolsters it even more, and it has very dense frequency throughout the entire series. For proper usage of the concept, full counter also gets a 5 out of 5. Full counter is always a part of Meliodas' toolkit that is used in the most sensical way to supplement a battle or situation, rather than take away from it or devalue a battle or situation. For full counter's score as a concept, another 5 out of 5. It's very simple, yet a very effective idea. Taking the idea of a reflector and building it into a character's arsenal and tying it to a weapon like a sword rather than a mirror, which is what is usually used as the reflecting technique in most pieces of fiction, is actually very, very interesting, and making it rather unique and stand out in comparison to a lot of its other similar techniques across fiction. It's also just very, very functional. It works very, very well. Finally, it's catching a 5 out of 5 for its cool factor too. Many of the moments in the manga are extremely hyped because of full counter, whether it be Meliodas' reveal of his identity in chapter 1 complemented by a full counter, to the slaughter of his father in chapter 331. Full counter, in spite of its simplicity, is super cool, and honestly, it just earns everything. It gets a solid, perfect 25 out of 25 points. Want to start off strong with this series, so I might as well give it a full score. Now, let me be real. I love full counter as a concept. Just as a concept, as a technique, as an ability, as it's used, I think it's fantastic, honestly. And it's seriously, in my opinion, one of the best abilities that Nakaba came up with, because it's extremely balanced despite being extremely broken. And that sounds a bit contradictory, but you understand what I mean if you've read the series. You've seen many a time where full counter has been outplayed, it's been outdone, it's been worked around. But at the same time, every single time it lands, every single time it's used, every single time it has that impact, that smack in the face, it's very, very good. It's very, very well developed. It's very, very thought out when used in a fight. And I like that. I like when techniques are woven into the narrative, woven into fight structure, and basically either act as this sort of like looming thing that a user has to worry about, or looming thing that the user's opponent has to worry about, and becomes a mind game of when it's going to be used and how it's going to be used. Stuff like that. It's very, very interesting. I enjoy it a lot. So yeah, full counter, it's great all around, seriously. However, what do you guys think about full counter? Please tell me in the comment section down below. But while you're down there, also tell me, how do you like this explained video? Did you like the format? Did you like how I explained it? Is there anything you want me to change? Is there anything you want me to change about the ranking system? Is there anything else you want me to do? And of course, drop what else you want me to explain in the comment section down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and hit that little notification bell so you don't miss out on any videos coming to the channel. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That Guy with the Pencil, writing off.